Flawedcast Nation, here we are, singing this song through the storm, coming at you live to your home, knowing that the future gonna be warm. We got crises of all times, coming live every day. Watch the news every night. Tomorrow, don't know what to say. Shit. Hey,
You
welcome
watch
to
the
the
news every night? You're watching the news every night these days?
no, fuck no. Now,
Okay, I was gonna
no.
say that's not safe. I
But
wouldn't
I
do
do
it.
listen to the radio news when I'm in the auto and
Oh, you have an auto?
mobile.
Yeah.
Got one of those. Cruise
All right.
around and from time to time, running errands and listening to NPR.
Telling
And
you.
Seems like you would need a rough terrain vehicle where you are. Like you need
Do
like
they have a? Is that a thing? Rough terrain vehicle?
like well, I mean, from where if it doesn't look like there's a vehicle in your immediate vicinity, looking at your background, and like to get there, you would need maybe like an amphibious vehicle, or are you talking five?
helicopters and feet.
There you
Those
go.
are the only two. And then the winter maybe skis.
Got it.
But yeah, I'm at transmitting live from 5,400 feet, Rampart Lakes.
That's the image behind you there.
Yeah, a
Now
place both of
imagine.
you all familiar with.
Yeah, I've been to that place. It's very beautiful, and I think what would be really cool is to, dude. I'm having some fucking audio problems over here.
With your
Podcast.
own audio.
Yeah,
Interesting. Huh.
I think I'm gonna have to step out and come back in. You guys keep the Flawedcast Nation happy.
Well, we're not going to be going anywhere because you're recording the call. So we'll have to restart.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Well, what do we do?
What about that song?
Let's restart.
We will have it.
Okay. It's your call.
we'll just
It's your
have to
call.
do edit.
Is the audio that bad on your side?
It's like as if, yeah, it's like I'm talking through a fan in my own ears. Yeah.
Yeah, then go restart.
Okay. Sorry.
It's Reason. I just decided to not use Reason.
Well,
go hearing myself.
Okay, so it was just that then when I click into Reason, it's fine. All of a sudden, yeah, okay. Well, this is still not very entertaining stuff.
Hey, we started off hot. We got that was a momentary lapse. We're heat-seeking missiles out here.
Okay. All right.
And
are we recording or not?
We're live. This is live TV, you guys. This is not a drill. This is not a drill.
Which is why we can be excused in some regards.
Yeah,
like
exactly. Yeah,
this is the Flawedcast. It's never claimed to be perfect cast.
The flawless cast. That's the other guys. Fucking assholes. Those guys are jerks.
Well, no, like I was, Mishek and I were just talking about this segment I just saw on an Al Jazeera clip, and it was from just a day ago, about the drop in oil prices, and it's one of these economic exchanges that it's like kind of the tip of the iceberg for what I think we're seeing rolling with the way that this virus has impacted the world. But at a point yesterday, people were selling.
Sorry, the best thing ever is the way that the background looks on Bjorn. It looks like there's wind blowing through his hair, and he's really actually on a mountain. It's too much.
That's great. I love that. Oh fuck,
it's really good.
I had no idea.
Yeah,
glad
it's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah, good, cool.
Of this episode.
The clip was speaking to the idea that yesterday people were paying people $30 a barrel to take oil off their hands. Apparently,
what is
the distributors had this overwhelming surplus, and the demand was only marginal. the sales of oil, because of lack of transportation usage and industrial usage, has just plummeted across the world, but especially, US, we're such big consumers, right? So
Right.
the market
Sure.
had way too much oil on it and they weren't buying it. And the reason that the price drop happened in the way it did was because oil is bought in like futures, in a sense. So people are betting on contracts that are about a month out, and they're forecasting their May sales. But because the surplus has continued after pumping through March, like everything was hunky fucking dory, they just all of a sudden it's like, oh, and nobody wants to like come correct on like actually buying that stuff in May. And so what are we going to do about that? And that's why there was this huge flux. And it's like there's been some recovery. It's back to positive digits at least. But it was really interesting for me because Mishak and I have been talking about different finances and mechanisms and like that whole world and what it means and like the terminology in it, et cetera. Trying to just understand how shares function, et cetera. And it's really interesting hearing like 3 guests on this show that were absolutely brilliant in the field that they were speaking to, the energy sector and trading in it. And their terminology was just like legalese of a different brand. It was like science. It was like speaking to a biologist about frog
What
sex.
show?
It was an
This
Al
is on the
Jazeera.
Flawedcast? Oh, okay. I thought it was an episode of the Flawedcast I forgot about somehow, and I was like, damn, we had these 3 extra. This was pretty dope.
Frog sex episode? We had a famous frog sex series with these biologists.
Yeah.
There's a whole frog sex part.
That part's good too. Yeah. Anyways, it was one of those. It was interesting to see that world, but it ties in the idea that during this pandemic, there's all sorts of other things happening concurrent with it because of it, and the fallout from it, even if we see some sort of turnaround, if you will, in the next coming months, is going to be continuous in a long way. Africa, I've heard forecasts that there's 30 plus African nations that are on the brink of facing starvation this summer. And famine is going to ripple through those countries hard because of the way the global economic machine works.
Well, and they haven't even really seen COVID yet.
Exactly. It's just getting
there. Yeah, exactly.
So all of that hand in hand, the Russia-Saudi oil war, they're saying the Saudi economy is about to collapse. Like China being bullish in the way that they're moving around the South China Sea right now in particular. Some new stuff came out about like their new fighter because they've got a new carrier fleet they've been developing to kind of push back on the U.S. strength in the South China Sea. And that they got this new fighter plane, I guess, that is basically mimicking the F-35 stealth technology, which is our new fighter. And apparently it was stolen kind of brazenly out the fucking Defense Department 10-something years ago, right? And I kind of vaguely remembered hearing that story when I saw this new one come out. They'd finally seen the Chinese plane. And
yeah.
They ganked that information right out the DOD and then went and built their own plane with it. And it's so far from a unilateral world anymore, and it fucking has happened so rapidly.
Yeah, that makes me really want to pull up this tweet from Spencer Wells because, I mentioned him before on the podcast, but he had one specifically about this moment in like world history, and say something funny real quick so I can find it.
The Spanish flu.
Well, I will say that one of my favorite effects of Rob's background is when you tilt your head slightly, you get Mickey Mouse ears.
I thought I saw that in the background.
That's real.
That's great.
That's the equivalent of saying something funny, doing something funny. It's not going to be the best for the people on the audio podcast version. So sorry about that, guys. Some funny shit was happening. Okay, so he said, I FaceTimed with my older daughter in NYC this morning. She's doing fine, luckily. But I told her that this was a once every few centuries event akin to the fall of the Roman Empire. The geopolitical and economic center of gravity in the world is shifting back to Asia. Europe and America will never come back from this. It's fascinating to be able to witness such a momentous historical event. Stay safe, everyone. It's going to be a wild ride. And I just thought that shit was kind of crazy.
Woo! Yeah.
In terms of what you're saying about the South China Sea and so on, you know.
Yeah. And that was recently. That was just the last few days or so.
Yeah, it was like yesterday that he posted that or something. I mean, it's just his opinion or whatever, but
yeah. Well, that's a great statement. Yeah. Wow.
So there's that little morsel of, optimism to chew on.
There's lots. Yeah, there's always got to be something to find to be optimistic about. Otherwise, what the fuck's the point?
Well, and in this case, there's Mickey Mouse ears going on. I might change my background at some point, audience, so get ready for that. No, but Bjorn, in terms of optimism, there's never been, I don't think, both the amount, like the number of people or the percentage of people on the globe who would have an interest in achieving a certain thing or things, mixed with the technology and resources that make achieving that goal not necessarily easier, but more possible than ever. You know what I mean? So there is a really good mix for optimism because, yeah, problems like this normally don't get solved with the quickness. However, this is something that is a ticking time bomb in Africa, like we just said, is going off or has already gone off in various parts of the world, most parts of the world. And there's every, motivation to want to stop it. So that could generate, circumstances in which it turns into something much less severe, right? But on the other hand, just looking at the trajectory it's already taken, the obvious red flags that have led to exactly what they warned for, having come to pass.
Well, I mean,
it's hard to be super optimistic.
The fact that you're not immune after having it necessarily.
Is that a fact, or where are we at with that? I'd like to know more.
I've heard several reports that people have got from, I think, real news agencies, that people have gotten it twice. Maybe that's wrong.
True, for sure. Like that's absolutely a fact. But what I don't know is that those aren't anomalies, or you know what I mean? Like that's the part where it seems like if that was just the way, if you just weren't immune at all, then I think we'd know that. So Meshach's screen has turned into a beating heart, which was
love. He's in love.
That was an accident. I was looking for another menu.
I was impressed. Let me say that much.
It was great timing. Good time to send love out to the world. That not quite the hilarity right there. We're being a little bit somber, but
gotta keep it light.
Keep it light, yeah. Speaking of lightness.
Yes. You wanted that to segue light from one of the co-hosts.
Yeah, I was hoping to set you up like, here's a stair ladder to happiness. Climb this, clean the gutters on the roof of joy. How about that?
That is deep enough for me to have to think about it and come back to you next episode to answer. It's just a metaphor rich in so many ways.
Climb the stair ladder.
The stair ladder or Mr. Ladder?
Yeah, exactly.
Meshach, could I just make a request that we get the flamingo background back for you?
Oh,
yeah, all right.
That was heavy. I just want to shout out to the flamingo background.
I just felt like showing some semblance of the world on fire was appropriate, but this is pretty close.
There we go. That is heavy. That's beautiful. And you get a little Mickey effect there too. And your hand's invisible, so that's dope. Bjorn, so not necessarily looking for pessimism. I wanted to mix wisdom and pessimism together. Pessimism.
It's hardcore.
That's almost like a bad sign.
That's a clothing.
Pesa wisdom. Pesa wisdom.
Oh, pessimistic. Oh, mystic.
So pessimistic. Oh.
No, pessimistic. MYSTIC. Yep, you get it.
Better than wisdomism.
I'm gonna use that in my pitch meeting. Just throw something out. Yep, you get it.
Speaking of, did we talk about this? If not, well, great. If we did, too bad. SNL Zoom version.
Yeah, we haven't talked about it, but I didn't see the whole thing. What do you think?
Well, I liked it, and I really appreciate that they did it. So Bjorn, are you familiar?
I've not seen it.
They had an episode where like most of the cast did like a skit, or many of the cast did a skit. Much of the cast, many of the cast, did a skit at home. You know what I mean? Like just their own solo social distancing skit, and then they were blended together with a couple of like collaborative things, and like
cool.
They had one that was pretty good. It was like about a company like doing their first Zoom meeting, and everybody was working from home, and they had like I think it was Kate McKinnon and Adie Bryant playing the like two secretaries who were just like not technologically savvy and just couldn't like master it and kept doing dumb stuff, and like Adie Bryant took the laptop into the bathroom with her at one point, and it was like, oh no, stop, please. So it was really good. It was a good episode, good effort, and I just wanted to shout that out.
I like it's light. It's light. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, it is light, isn't it? It's light. Yeah. You know what's not light, but what's good is Ozark. Watch that. On
finished the whole show.
You've already finished it?
No, I'm saying, have you finished the whole show? Is that what
you mean? Season 3 just came out, and we're savoring it over here.
Nice, good for you.
Yeah.
I'd like to make an admittance of many forms, but I believe I've even perhaps on the cast made the declaration that I rarely engage in the like television. Deep watching of television shows. And that's changed a little bit as time's passed. And during this crisis, I've jumped into the Walking Dead sequence.
Oh, interesting. I haven't done that one.
It seemed like the right
I haven't done that one.
Time.
Okay. It sounds a little creepy at this time, actually. But
yeah. It's been
more than
it's ridiculously brutal. It's probably the most brutal thing I've seen on film. It's like horror, deep horror movie brutal. And I'm not a big fan of horror film either.
No, so you're not. You hate horror films. Right? I think you wanted there to be a law that you can't have ads for them. You can't preview.
Yes, I actually have said that.
Yeah.
and I still agree with that idea because, God dang it, a lot of them really fuck with me. You like how I said "God dang it" and then
I did. I was processing that. Yeah.
Yeah. Geez. Horror films are crazy to me, but this, despite the horror, which it's sad to kind of like see your brain get around, like you'll deal with it, like right, like you will adapt. The storyline, post-apocalyptic shit, social interaction, the politicking of people is the type of shit that I fucking love. Like, it's what I loved out of Asimov, if you will, even though that was like not just post-apocalyptic, it's like post-super future civilization.
We should look up how they're doing on that Asimov series, by the way. Remember, Apple TV Plus is doing it.
Yeah.
We need an update on that. Could we call one of our researchers and have them appear as another square and give us a report?
I'd like that. Maybe one of them will do it for us. Yeah. But I think that the great thing that this moment speaks to, and that like the idea of post-apocalyptic shit always speaks to, the idea people laugh at preppers a lot of the time, is that it seems far-fetched. It seems like it could never fall all the way to pieces. But we look at the fragility that this moment in time has shown and exposed within the economic system being built on fucking absolutely tenuous foundations, and resource management around that, but as well the social fabric of how people want to interact with these sorts of problems. You've got people protesting it and like being dickbags, like intentionally to the world. Like it's there's so many things exposed in the fragility of our system, socially, economically, etc. When you look at a time in like this, and that's what's I think got the like post-apocalyptic vibe so strong for me, is that like, okay, I feel like we're probably going to pull out of this, you know, like to maybe even a positive recovery economically in every way in like 5 to 10 years.
5 to 10 years.
But like it's going to take a while. Like this dial got turned back. To get it back up and pumping, I think it's going to take a little while. And maybe I'm being pessimistic on that, but like
pessimistic.
Well, I can back up a couple of points there.
Nonetheless, the future doesn't have any. There's no proof to me that if this system continues, the arbitrary value of currency and real estate and everything around this world of ours, if that continues, if we don't put a standard to it, like if there isn't a square footage on the earth that's worth $1, and that's something that we attribute value to, or a amount of water, fresh water on the earth, or amount of silver or gold or other standards that we've adopted in the past, like if it doesn't equivocate anything but our trust in these fools, and we can see that when it's fucking showtime, then the next time we hit something that's even marginally worse than this, man, you better be a prepper.
Well, it seems right now, I wish I had been a prepper. I wish I didn't have Mickey Mouse ear.
I heard this episode of The Daily. They were talking to their head reporter on issues of like viruses and outbreaks and health and etc. And he's been right about basically every prediction so far. About he was right in like February when he said there's going to be a lockdown and quarantine. He was right about that. Yeah, and they asked him about the vaccine, and he said, Michael Barbaro asked the question about the 18-month kind of timeline that we've all heard about. That's like this, possible vaccine timeline, and he said he just explained it in a different way. And he said, look, first of all, the fastest vaccine we've ever had was in the 50s. It was for the mumps, and it took 4 years. And those 4 years were after we kind of knew what we were dealing with. Right now, when people talk about an 18-month window, it's the technology that is involved in that process that has all gotten better since then. That if we knew what to do, if we knew exactly what we were dealing with, the fastest it could possibly go is 18 months. But that has very little indication of whether or not it actually will go anywhere near that fast. 4 years is the record.
Exactly.
So, so to a degree, and one of the things to be optimistic, there is some data now coming out now that some antibody tests are available. And antibody tests will show if you've already, fought the disease in some way, whether you're symptomatic or not. And a lot of those antibody tests are coming out to show that way more of the population in the states that have been able to implement these tests have been infected. And that turns out to be great news. I
didn't hear that. That's actually fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, especially if the antibodies hold. Especially if your immunity stays long enough for you to fight this kind of cyclical potential battle. But good news is it looks like a hell of a lot of more people are non-symptomatic and or recovered already than we originally thought. And the more these tests come out, the more that may turn out to be true. So yeah, as one optimistic point of view.
Yeah. Well, then in keeping with the optimismist, there was the recent reporting that it had actually been an accident at a lab near the wet market in Wuhan or wherever.
Oh, buddy.
You haven't heard this?
Yeah.
Yeah, like Washington Post reported on it and shit. It wasn't like it wasn't a very like fringe thing. That the U.S. intelligence had been mostly convinced or something like that that is what happened.
Very interesting. Huh.
But the best way forward is for us to all gather and protest all this shit.
So
definitely gathering is the ideal right now.
Yeah.
On today's episode of The Daily, they followed it up by researching the background of those protests to ask who is organizing them and who's funding them.
And it's Betsy DeVos's brother, right?
Exactly. Tied directly to the administration.
Wow.
That's so fucking crazy.
They're using the exact same copy, the same language on their posts to advertise between the three protests. They're literally a copy and paste campaign.
Wait, hold on. So let's think this one through for a second, because I don't know if I'm smart enough to get this at face value. The Trump administration would be consciously instigating or promoting or both or more groups to gather and protest the idea of social distancing and quarantining in a time of a pandemic.
Well done. You win.
Sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt you with the screen change.
I think the listeners won't know what just happened.
I know. I'll describe it though. I'm where Meshach is right now, except in the daytime.
Your background has become, yeah.
You're going to change his background to show the image of the trailer in which I am currently living. It's a much more pleasing image than I could show if I showed you my background right now, because that's an empty, very clean trailer with everything nicely stowed and the bed made. That is not the current state of this trailer.
Okay.
Well, living in something is life,
Yeah.
Sorry, but continue, Rob. Sorry, Trump.
Oh, okay. Well, so they are consciously desiring, let's say, for people who support them to get together in groups in this moment. These guys know that's going to kill their followers. Like it's literally behavior that's going to kill the people doing it. So it's like, as just unthinkably stupid as it is, it's also kind of like got that twisted poetic justice to it of it's like, well, because a lot of these people who do this type of stuff have died. Like pastors who have held services and stuff have ended up literally dying, not just like getting it, but dying. And so I just think it's interesting to think that they would be trying to get their followers to get together in ways that'll probably kill them off before the election. Like, or not entirely, they won't be extinct, but pockets of them will be destroyed by this. You know what I mean? It's just very weird. Why would they want to do that? It's not like they don't know that the science is real.
I think the power of the meeting, the number of individuals that it took to have those protests, and that would get infected and die, the media that comes out of their death is less than was caused by the protest itself, and the meaning that came, and the millions of people that saw that and might hearken to that idea of their liberties being trampled on by this mandate for stay at home. So
I mean, it's the only answer, isn't it?
No, it's a war. It's war. And it's a war of information, and it has been for a while. And you can see in this there are casualties in real life.
Real quickly, Meshach, did you just turn on the Nirvana Nevermind album cover artwork? Is there a naked baby chasing a dollar right behind your head?
You really want to know what's right behind my head?
Seems like, or it's a shark, one of the two. But it seems like it should be the baby. I agree.
Oh, it's a wicked ass jellyfish,
That's
listeners.
right. Yeah.
Oh
And
man,
yeah.
So apparently, listeners, we use Skype, brought to you by Skype, and these fuckers, they copied the other competition and they got backgrounds now, so we're all trying them out this episode, and it's just a listener's delight.
Yeah, a viewer's indulgence, like
Indeed.
whatever camera slides we have on here.
I mean, this is like candy. Mishak has just changed his background to one of an intricate architectural landscape, which I'm very impressed by.
It's great. Yeah, me too. I also like.
So Bjorn, I'm feeling you. I think this makes sense. They are saying, all right, we're gonna lose. Like, if we do this, if a group of 2,500 people get together in Olympia, Washington on Saturday, 5% of them might die or something. I don't know, like high number or whatever.
Okay.
So great. We're still going to get a lot of numbers. We're going to get a lot of publicity. Or we're not going to lose a lot of voters. We're going to get publicity for this event. Like, we can almost gain more voters by losing these ones, is what you're saying, I think, right? Like it's literally a sacrifice of certain people consciously for some sort of.
Like, yeah, in some ways it's ultimately about voters, but it's also ultimately about like the great narrative, like the story that's spun about this country, like, and owning those moments and speaking to it. If you're loud enough, we've learned that's the story that's told, or at least a big part of the story. and these guys know that. That's this era that we live in now is the manipulation of the story. And if you have enough people on your storyline, man, you can do whatever you want. Like, yeah, it's voters, but it's the narrative too. It's that grand thing.
Like, I guess what I'm saying of like my interpretation of your reason for why they're doing it is accurate. Is that
like to promote the cause in a sense of like creating like fraternalism sort of with the people that are engaged in that, regardless of like what loss of life surrounds it, you know. And they're speaking to people actually doing it.
I feel like there's I want to make something clear for my own purposes. I'm not sure that I'm buying yet that there is an orchestrated campaign from the president to protest these issues. I think he likes it, and I think he's obviously supporting it, and etc. I'm not claiming that conspiracy quite yet. However, the way that the protesters who were interviewed described what they're protesting, I thought Ben Shapiro, who I haven't agreed with very many words that I've ever heard him say, but a quote I was just looking for, I couldn't quite find it fast enough. But he said something to the effect of, talking to the protesters, if you're going to protest, at least wear masks and gloves and practice social distancing, because what you are protesting is that you are a responsible enough citizen to take serious those rules without the government needing to tell you to do so. And if you go out and prove to the government that you are not responsible enough to follow those rules, you are reinforcing that we need to put you behind a wall somewhere. So you are totally shooting yourself in the foot to go out and protest and not practice the rules that we know will apply.
I like that.
Okay.
I like that.
I like it for one reason, and for another reason, I find it to be a clever way to try to flip the argument, because it's kind of like it's assuming that these people are gathered. Like, it's basically giving them this credit that they have no way earned, that they are there to protest, that they're responsible enough to be trusted, which I don't believe is what they're there to do. What they're there to do is literally just perpetuate their own complete ignorance. Like, they don't understand what's going on. They're confused, they're scared, and they're mad, and so they're just going out and expressing all those things. I do not think that they've organized themselves around the principle that society is responsible enough to deal with this themselves. They don't even believe it or take it seriously. They wouldn't wear masks. They wouldn't wear gloves. They wouldn't practice social distancing at a thing. Ben Shapiro saying that, I'm just saying, gives them the credit of being intellectually valid in some way, which they're not.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Sure.
The irony is, like, you'll see these pictures of like the funniest protest signs or whatever, and several of these people that are like holding protest signs about wearing masks are wearing masks, and I don't think that all of them are just doing it for compliance. I think that some of those humans out there are aware that if they do that thing, they might come home with a disease if they're not careful. And so some of them are taking it seriously enough to actually practice those things. But I think also there's a degree of manipulation at play that specifically plays on the kind of people you're describing, Rob. That is a fearmonger, Big Brother, kind of message, and this is about, you just go out and buck the system, don't believe any of this nonsense. But I think there's also an appeal to the Tea Party-ish kind of people, which is the same kind of funding backing for these protests, which are about individual rights and the government should just stay out of it, and et cetera. Like I've talked to a couple of friends who are more on the independent libertarian kind of slant. One, Steve, who's a friend of the show, friend of the cast, and that was his kind of immediate take. It's just like his take was, now let's just sit back and watch how badly the federal government fucks everything up.
Yes, fair. Okay, but that in itself is almost like all too tempting. I know. I'm just saying that last phrase is bait for a whole nother conversation.
Yeah,
about exactly. Conservatives destroying the government so that it looks like it can't do anything, so they can win arguments later about how it doesn't work. But that's one stripe of things. But I don't know. I think there's a element here that at least I just thought of as it was being talked about, where you're dividing people who basically have similar fears into marginal parts of that same fear. Because I think the truth is almost everyone on Earth is feeling like we need to do things to prevent this thing from killing more people and creating more chaos. But some people are wary of what these governments are doing, and I'm not, I'm one of those people. I don't feel comfortable. I don't know if there's going to be an election next year. There's a lot of things like that. I very much am not pleased and watching carefully what's happening with some degree of like helplessness and some degree of like, I don't know, patience, for lack of a better way to describe it. Like, let's just see what happens. And I think that general feeling is shared by probably a lot of different political and other worldview beliefs. You know what I mean? So it's like, by getting some of these people like anti-vaxxers or Trump people to take that same type of fear and bring it together in this one way, in some ways neutralizes the greater ability. And now Bjorn has an ant war behind him, which is awesome, because that's COVID.
I'm glad you picked that up quick. Yeah, I didn't know if it would come through that clear. Glad it did.
Yeah.
This background thing is too much, and it changes topics too much. So I'm gonna apologize again, but
I'm pretty happy with mine right now.
For the people watching, it's great. For the listeners, my bad.
I just want to give you a little sunrise.
Come to YouTube. We got this on YouTube for you. You can come enjoy it there.
Yeah, that's where you gotta check this out and join Super Chat.
So, but I
wouldn't say it's great. It's less annoying than just hearing it.
Yeah.
The conspiratorial tone, in a lot of regards to at least I don't know. Do you want to get back to some of that as far as what you were saying about
sure,
what's happening with the idea of China? Because I haven't read that WAPO East piece. No, I'd like you to speak to it a little more.
I see what you're saying. I thought you were never mind.
And I'd like to double back to that, if we can, because I think that's really the Chinese government has been saying, and from what I've heard for a long time, that this might have been a Western creation. and that it's
right.
They've been blaming the United States for creating it. And it's interesting that our media is at this point saying, no, it was China that created it. And so I'm curious, like, how both storylines read and like how to parse the truth out of all of this. Like,
well, I can't say I'm like super studied up on it, but even just searching for Chinese lab accident, there's a number of different articles. I don't see Washington Post right up front, so I'm not sure if maybe I misunderstood that or if it's just not hitting high on the list. But CNN has the headline, U.S. explores possibility that coronavirus spread started in Chinese lab, not a market.
Yeah.
And it says U.S. intelligence and national security officials say the United States government is looking into the possibility that the novel coronavirus spread from a Chinese laboratory rather than market, according to multiple sources familiar with the matter who caution it is premature to draw any conclusion. So, boom, there you go.
All right. Yeah.
Premature. Who knows? But in terms of the authoritarian piece and different governments handling it different ways and so on, I mean, I think that is a concern. What's crazy is in my job, I ended up talking to a lot of people in different parts of the world in the last week or two, like by Skype or Zoom and shit. And like South Africa, Vietnam, like all over the world, basically. And different countries are handling it in different ways. Some have like strict rules where you can't do certain things. Like I think in South Africa, the person I was talking to couldn't even ride his bike outside.
Wow.
Whereas in Vietnam, they were saying they could basically, it would sound very similar to like the way it is in the Seattle area. You know what I mean? Where it's like there's not really strict rules, but you're just supposed to be, like there's certain businesses that aren't allowed to be open, but in terms of individual behavior, there's not really like, I can go walk my dog. Nobody tells me not to do that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I can go to the grocery store. I can go to Wendy's or whatever if I want to.
Yeah.
So in Vietnam, it sounded like it was more that way. But different governments obviously are handling it different ways.
A lot of Wendy's in Vietnam?
Yeah, that's the biggest thing is the Frosty.
Jesus, I didn't know.
They're thinking about changing the name of the country around that. It's so popular, but we'll see what happens. A lot of people are saying that. Yeah.
Viet Wendy's? How do you do that?
It's on the list. It's one of the things they're reviewing. Yeah.
In India, apparently, a buddy of mine is in Nagpur, and their lockdown includes no vehicles. So you go to a grocery store, it's all by foot, and there are government officials at the intersections who can tell you where the nearest grocery store is within walking distance.
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah.
And then like you have to go to that one. Like they'll make sure if you go to one that's not the closest to your address, they'll be like, "You're muted, I think." Oh.
Really? Who's muted?
I didn't hear Mishak while I was talking. Is it because I'm too powerful?
Yeah, you are very powerful. Yeah. Is it because I'm too powerful? No, yeah, unquestionably so. Yeah, you win.
That's gotta be it. Yeah, that's probably.
If you give Rob a hammer and the bell to hit, he'll hit it harder than anybody else. No question.
By accident, yeah, that'll be a problem.
I've seen Rob run people through all sorts of situations. Like Rob is not to be messed with. I've had to pull you off of people.
It may have happened once.
You didn't have a murderous intent. No, it's happened at least a dozen times, I'd say.
I don't know about a dozen.
Let's not exaggerate here, right?
I like it. I like it. Let's say 12 or 13.
You have great force to you when you'd like, and I'm sure that was why you didn't hear Mishak. He's also transmitting from Vietnam, I believe, or Bhutan. I'm not sure. Somewhere on.
I thought it was maybe Brazil. I don't know.
No, I don't.
Maybe.
I'm not feeling that.
Yeah, it's looking a little bit more like Bolivia. No, just kidding. I don't know.
I'm feeling based on the characters on the wall back there. That's actually definitely.
That doesn't look like Spanish or Portuguese. I mean, Portuguese. Sorry.
Yeah. I think
Well, Meshack just disappeared. For the listeners, the image of Meshack quickly was gone, and all we could see was the landscape of architecture that is behind him. So, for the viewers and the listeners, what we can say, and there's a lot of you guys, so thank you for just religiously following us. Every word we say, very much appreciated. It'll serve you. You will go to heaven for that. I was just going to say, what do we do about the whole keeping these governments in check? Who knows? What's the answer? How do you do it? How do you both? Because everybody's afraid of each other's freedom in a way. Like if everybody else is allowed to do whatever they want, then any effort you make to keep yourself safe is irrelevant, right? Like everybody has to kind of give away some of their individual freedom so that everybody has collective safety or something. And it seems like everybody's down with that basically worldwide for the most part, other than these people gathering and shit like that. But at the same time, what governments aren't going to take that shit and use it to their advantage? I don't know. Just a question.
Who's not going to take anything to their advantage in this grand geopolitical landscape? Like anybody gets enough, they're going to go for it. That's just the way every nation.
Does it become what Spencer was saying? Spencer Wells was saying that it's like the once in several centuries, fall of Rome moment. Like this is literally it.
It's a great fucking scramble. It always has been. It just, who knows who's going to be riding out on top of all this shit, right?
To the listeners, Bjorn changed his background while talking. All right, jumping back into it. It's
always been Wild West. It's always been Wild West. And actually, it's an interesting thing that I've gleaned from The Walking Dead. Because, look, I'm always hunting for story depth, character depth, development. I'm trying to write a little myself, and knowing the human form and its capacity is really interesting. And in The Walking Dead, they speak a lot to the idea of violence and manipulation and the transactional nature of bargaining between communities or groups and how that can function on violent levels or levels that are peaceful or with understanding, etc. Everybody's working on their background now, but the basics of it are so not only personal and individual in the sense that one human can embody them, but they're also national, they're state-based too, and these the capacity for violence, the capacity to want to rip somebody off in a transactional deal. Everybody's scrambling for their own on some real ass wild west, and the only reason in the modern world you don't have more interactions of grandiose military shit is because everybody knows that it's so fucked to even go there right now that people are really shy about pulling the trigger on making big wars happen, because we haven't seen what war between really similarly capable combatants on a full scale looks like in the modern world. We haven't seen that. We haven't seen what the US versus China, or the US versus Russia, or Russia versus China, or Japan versus anything. We haven't seen any of those stack ups in the modern era. That's, they all know. It's, and I don't know, the warfare now, because everybody moved from that brink of the Cold War to the new info war era, now people are hedging their bets on that. Now it's about fucking in the game Civilization, you can lose your city, the culture, from another civilization, right? Even just because even though you are militaristically strong, you ain't holding your nuts right or whatever, right? So they're gonna come take your city, right?
One of the biggest flaws mankind can make, or biggest
one of the hardest things to master in Civ 6.
I don't know how else to say it.
It's really hard to get it right.
Yeah, just gotta be holding them just right.
I just get so passionate, and that's how it comes out.
Well, it's a passionate subject, especially when it comes to the game.
Yeah, it's man, this shit's all Wild West, and I feel like nation states are operating the same as humans would in any circumstance like that too. It's gonna,
Well,
like when the nuclear standoff holds us away from like seeing the capacity of our militaries, right? Because we can have all the drones in the world, but we're not sending drones if it's nuke time, you know. And we can have a bunch of troops all over the place, but we also have missiles that can reach you, and vice versa, for a lot of countries. And so, like, to your point, we haven't seen that kind of like, what can we all do? Because what can we all do happens really quickly, and all of us die.
Well, and Russia, and this is the great part about Rasputin's plays, is that look, he knows that Crimea has great value to him as the entrance to the Black Sea, really strong geopolitical standpoint, right? Russia has always been obsessed with owning the Black Sea, and Turkey is their problem with that because they're controlling the Sea of Marmara or whatever, Dardanelles and the Bosporus, and they've got Russia in like a headlock as far as their global trade because of that. St. Petersburg ices over every winter. So it's always been this like Russian proxy to really be more powerful in that region. And because it's their need for that, they couldn't declare war in this like outlandish, like, I'm going to mob in on what?
I'm sorry, the backgrounds are such a distraction. I'm sorry. I was
you guys are
really happy with
really good,
my current one. I just
I'm really happy with it too, yeah.
I couldn't let you continue to be on a positive thought. I'm sorry. Didn't mean it.
Yeah. What I'm trying to get at though is like the way that Russia dealt with the Ukraine here a few years ago when they moved in and, you know, had it like tried to like take over the eastern part of the country, the Donetsk region, and annex Crimea. Like that move has been centuries in the making, right?
Right.
And they didn't have a problem with that while it was the USSR. And they didn't have a problem as long as everybody in their field of interest played their game. But they had to make the move mildly militaristically now because they needed to make the assertion. And they knew that that was small enough of a play that there would be no kickback.
Right.
And they could make the move unopposed, and there wasn't going to be a big fallout. So
and create enough confusion around the move, you know, for which like it gave plausible ignorance to their enemies, right? You know, because it kind of allowed the enemies like the United States and so on to go, well, it really looks like what they're doing is running up in the store and grabbing the shit off the shelves. But they did pay a bunch of little kids to do it. And, you know, those kids are taking this stuff to a place near their own homes rather than back into Russia. So, you know what I mean? Like, it was one of those things where, like, it just gave enough of a conversation around what was actually happening to somehow kind of not justify it, but, like, excuse it or something. I don't know. I thought it was kind of unique the way they did that.
It was billed as a civil war. With like Russia being a secession, like the part of the country seceding to Russian needs, like, right? That's how they build it,
right?
And that's how it was. The other countries were coached in how to spill that. You're right, and it was an easy out because of that.
Right. Well, yeah, in that weird way of that side effect of like, okay, maybe nobody's buying the excuse. Yeah. You know what I mean? But at the same time, it gives them like the necessity to at least review it and see, oh, is it true? And in that time, things change fast enough that you're like, well,
you know. It just speaks again to the strength of the narrative. Like, you know,
right.
It's all about how it's spun in the moment. You guys are killing it with the background right now.
Mijek has a really special. Is that a Macklemore concert?
Looks like it must have been. Yeah.
Looks like Elton John out here. Yeah. You know? One of those two. They're like the two biggest stars in the world. Yeah.
Definitely the two biggest.
Macklemore and Elton John.
Have they released an album together? Or at least
coming out. It's coming out, yeah. produced by Kanye. They're all Buddhists now. It's gonna be real good, really good. So what about Jared Kushner?
What? Tell me about him.
Well, he's not a very friendly, skinny guy.
He's not.
He's a jerk. Well, I heard you guys heard of this podcast called Trump Inc.
No, I haven't.
It's very good. It's very good. Like really, really good. And it's about exploring areas in which like people are profiting off of the Trump presidency, basically.
Okay.
And it's what's amazing about it is at every level this administration seems to be doing shit that's so shady. So it moves so fast, like the news cycles part of it, that people are like, oh yeah, like 4 months ago maybe we were worried about him saying that we were going to host the G8 at his resort or whatever, but he walked it back and that's not happening, so we've forgotten about it. But like these guys will be like, well, hold on, like what happened there? Like let's explore it. And like, is it possible that he's still, or someone in his orbit is like still gonna profit from it? Like just because they moved it out of Doral or whatever the fuck it's called, like is it now going to his buddy's place or is it going to one of his other places? You know what I mean? Because that tends to be what happens with this shit is, they'll do something, get a headline, get bad press about it, everybody moves on, and then they like go do something similar, but not exactly the same, So Trump Inc. is very good because it just sticks on a story, like each episode is.
Did they cover the recent request from the Trump Hotel from the government to give them a rent break during the coronavirus?
They might have. I didn't hear that.
Trump
So
Hotel.
they did.
Trump Hotel rents property in Washington from the United States government and rents part of the hotel out to the Secret Service to have an office in Trump Hotel to protect Donald Trump.
Yeah.
They're asking for free rent during this time and not giving free rent to the Secret Service.
Nor any of the people who might be staying there. It's out of control. It's really crazy. Anyway, Trump Inc. is dope, and they had an episode today called like he got it at Jared or something like that, and it was about Jared Kushner. And I didn't finish it, but what they were like building up was like this whole thing about how, first of all, everybody knows he's given all types of crazy tasks or, things for his portfolio, like Middle East peace and fucking whatever, like coming up with the fucking UFO flying saucer to get to Mars on, like he's in charge of it all. He's, the one redesigning the $20 bill and all that shit. And so they're saying like, he came into the briefing about coronavirus.
He's the quote unquote smart guy in the room.
Yeah.
And that's what they think of him.
And he came in and they like played a clip of him saying basically like, yeah, I got on the horn this morning and talked to, the president said his friends in New York were telling him the hospitals were struggling. So I called, the mayor and so on and asked exactly, what do they need? What's their burn rate, and whatever. And I unlocked the resources to get this stuff to them. And then the Trump Inc. podcast is basically kind of saying, okay, well, we called like de Blasio's press office and they like totally confirmed everything Jared Kushner said. Like, yes, he has helped them get stuff or whatever. And they were like that, knowing that podcast and the way they do things, like it was far too convenient. And then the implications seemed to be that people know, like in de Blasio's office, for example, if they say, nah, we haven't seen anything come yet, they won't get anything. Like they may not be getting what they're being, so they're basically all being bullied into, saying, yeah, these guys are great, they're doing a great job, because anybody who criticizes them or whatever, like, is subject to losing, like, citizens. You know what I mean? Like, so they're just playing that level of the chess. So, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's exactly right.
Considered what if he's only considered smart by that group because he's quiet? What if, like, if you actually, like, hung out with Jared Kushner and you, like, got him drunk, you just found out he's just a fucking idiot. He's just so stupid, and he just
You know what's funny?
I wouldn't be surprised.
They almost addressed that because they said they gave like 3 examples of instances in which he's like done like really counterintuitive, really risky things that, like, because they bought that building 666 6th Avenue or wherever in fucking New York, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then it was right before the recession. It was a big failure, and they said somehow, whereas most people would have learned from these moves, like, to be cautious, Jared Kushner learned to take on as much risk as is, as is possible for him. And so somehow, so having this big portfolio is, kind of on that level of having that risk, because it looks like, okay, Middle East peace doesn't happen, Jared Kushner doesn't get a win, like so there is a risk.
But I think, like,
but
he's playing his career in that sense, or Donald Trump rather is playing Jared Kushner's career, the way that they play the market, the way that they play business, is that high risk, high reward, diversify, just like scattershot, only focus on the wins, move on from the losses. You don't govern that way.
No, you don't.
Do.
No, you don't. And I think Robbie said something interesting about his resume. You don't put your losses on your resume either. You don't put your failures on your resume. You put the shit you did well. You put the awards that you've gotten and the jobs you did well at. You know what I mean?
That'd be the funniest shit ever to see a resume of someone that is like lost $62,000 in one single minute. From the company.
That'd be really good.
I cannot stop eating donuts.
Yeah. Well, just about as good as the resume that was circulating a while ago that I showed you, Rob, that was like perfect comprehension of humans. And
I wish we could have that up again. That was so good.
I'll find it for one of the next episodes. It was an
we gotta put in show notes. Yeah.
For a position at a bar, actually here in Seattle, I believe. And the person was like saying that they had a perfect knowledge in general.
Yeah, like
they were like
really over the top shit. Like
it was like they were like, I can't even remember the particulars, but like to what they were voted the most likely as in their high school situation, like to like how good they were at baseball when they were 16, and the fact that like they've had no actual professional career up to the age of 23, and except that they've worked for the family of da-da-da-da as a caretaker, laundry doer, and such, like like some crazy, it's like perfectly done. It's brilliant. I'll bring it out. I'll bring it out next time.
Gotta come back, man. We gotta dig that bastard up.
Yeah.
Dig it right up. So that would be good.
My resume for a little while, when I was getting jobs in bars, I knew that resumes dropped off at bars basically just get covered in beer and thrown in the trash until you actually need somebody right now, and you just find the one that's available and you call them. So
you laminated your shit?
No, so I just wrote stupid shit all over mine so that people would put it aside and let other people read it.
That's basically what this was.
I love that.
Yeah. So like I had like I listed in my skill set underwater jiu-jitsu. I had like 6-time Olympic gold medalists, like in just randomly at different places between education and stuff. Because why not?
We need more of that in the world, is what probably one of the morals of the story would come down to. It's just a little bit more bullshit. Actually,
I was in the world.
We got too much. I was gonna say, wait a minute.
Wait, strike that. Reverse.
New York is in my ear over here. They said no.
Yeah, they said no. Rewind that, Rob.
Yeah.
There's too much fictionalization in the world already. It's a bunch of fucking pretend pundits everywhere you turn, and we are them as well. And
well, we're actually real.
Okay, we're actually pundits. Sure, there you go. But it's just a whole lot of fucking bias. And I remember when it wasn't that long ago, there were pundits around, but you did turn on news, and it was a lot more akin to what you get from like BBC, Al Jazeera networks back 30 years ago here in the US from our mainstream networks. And now it's just a whole fucking series of punditry. And it's
there's a lot of bloviating.
I think the intelligence and the capacity, the divisiveness in our country has mirrored the rate at which media has transferred from being news deliverers to being pundit supporters, like at that rate.
Right. I think you might be right. I think cable news. One good thing for me about the whole pandemic has been that I just stopped watching news altogether. I'm trying to read stuff, so I'm like moderately up to date on, whether it fucking spreads through thought or not. You know what I mean? Like, fuck, who knows, right? Just trying to be aware, but outside of that, I've just stopped because it's just like all I'm gonna hear is the number of deaths. And as we talked about on a previous episode, it's like, and what they're gonna say is today was the worst day.
Right.
Yeah.
Every day for like a while. That's gonna be literally. It's only gonna get worse, for a period. So each news broadcast is predictably not only going to be negative, but be as negative as it's been yet every time for a while. And then hopefully that subsides. So for me, a liberation from that is nice. But I'll tell you what, man, it's weird. Somebody said I heard this from a colleague the other day, and I actually really thought it was well said, even though it was kind of like in a corny setting, but it was like about how diversity in this moment also includes like how wide-ranging different people's circumstances are. This is in relation to work, but like that there's people who you're dealing with day to day who have 3 kids that are at home needing homeschool, and they used to that parent is asked to do their job from home while they have kids who also need a teacher or whatever, versus somebody who's totally single, alone, hasn't seen a human being in weeks, versus somebody who's cooped up in their place with one or more people, or whatever, and can't get a moment of solitude. What I mean? Like seriously, like it's the whole range, and it's an interesting thing how everyone's experiencing this like in their own way, and I just thought it was an interesting line of thought to explore. So
Mishek has been the master of solitude. What's the number of people you've interacted with now? Like under 30 for the last month?
No, it's 43 as of today. No. I went to the store today. I didn't add right before the cast. I went in. It was. I'm at 51.
I think I might have you beat, man.
I've literally counted everyone in the grocery store, everyone in the gas station, every time I've seen any human in 5 weeks.
Okay, I haven't quite been that diligent, but in terms of my counting, and I crossed paths with humans at stores like a while back, but we did Instacart our last few rounds, as well as just delivery in general for food, groceries. We haven't done delivery of cooked food. We've only made our own food. But so like for the most part, we haven't done seen any days where no other human whatsoever. Like maybe walk past one while walking the dog, 6 feet away or trying to be 6 feet away. Not always, but
no,
man, I'll tell you what.
I think
yesterday I went to get some gas and I had to pay for the gas in cash.
They paid you for the gas.
Right.
Yeah, I hope so.
But it was a quick trip to the near gas station, which is just a few minutes away. And I got there and realized I forgot my gloves. I had my little scarf for my face, but I forgot my gloves. And I had to pay in cash. And it was this weird, I did the whole thing and it did, it was fine. But when I got the change back from the lady, and she didn't have gloves on either. She inadvertently touched my hand when she was putting the change. And
that's gross.
There was a moment of like pure joy. There was just like, for some reason, I was just like, that is the fucking best thing that's happened to me in weeks. It was just like,
Human.
very subtle. But I was like, holy shit, my whole day is amazing now.
Wow. Yeah.
That's very interesting, and I like it.
It's interesting.
But
yeah. Huh.
I would be mad. I would be like, don't fucking touch
got
my
a
hand.
lady at Elger Bay Grocery. This is
exactly.
That's what that means. He's got a girlfriend.
Yeah. All of a sudden, you gave me my change. We're dating.
COVID brings out all types of shit. You know what I mean? The good, the bad, and the ugly. It turns out.
I also immediately Purelled my hand right there in front of her.
So you got Purell? You're fucking hoarding Purell?
No, they have it at the store. Actually, now they're out.
They are hoarding? Oh, they better be.
Yep. No, they have a little pump right there by the register.
COVID courtship.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll be damned is all I can really say at this point.
Yeah. I've definitely interacted with a hell of a lot more than 50-something people in the last while.
Really?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm at work for 3 days a week, at least 4 days a week.
Oh.
I have 2 staff members, and then I have people doing pickups, and I'll go out in gloves and a mask and give them their product. But, and I make them, I don't take cash. They're paying by card over the phone. But I'm still seeing them. I'm still going up to their car, putting it in there. And then I'm going to the grocery store, and I'm buying food at the grocery store. And
for personal and business?
Both, yes, correct. Yeah. And the cash and carry where I get a lot of the food for the store, we're not doing cafe service, but we're doing still a little bit of production here and there for like hot hitters like fish cakes and stuff. But they were just like, it was a week ago even. It wasn't even like today. Like somehow it seems like maybe today it'd be more acceptable than a week ago, because a week ago somehow seems like it was worse. I don't know why. At least in Washington State, they say that like there's this plateau-y thing that's happened here, and we may be like doing better. Okay, I'll wait for the full statistics to all develop and us to like really know when we're on the backside of this fucking thing.
I just got to make the analogy real quick though. They say that, but at the same time, it's kind of like, well, the car is, like speeding out of control down the road, and we just pumped the brakes instead of just slamming on them, and the speedometer has gone down. Like, so it's possible that by pumping versus just slamming on the brakes, we can maybe slow the car down. And people being like, well, fuck it, let's just let the brake pedal go. That's obviously we're done. We're good. We're slowing down. It's fine.
It's like a week and a half ago, I was there at the cash and carry, and the guy who I know very well at the register, no mask, no gloves, and I'm in mask and gloves. I was like, hey, how's it going? How you guys been? He's like, oh man, I feel like things are starting to get back to normal, man. Like,
like you're tripping in your mask and gloves there, buddy. Things are normal and you're not.
Yeah, what are you talking about? Like,
oh my god.
But then, like,
there was like literally 4,000 people who died in New York that night or something. You know what I mean? But, yeah, things are normal.
9/11 every day now. It's
normal.
Yeah.
Fine. Things are getting right on back to normal.
Right on back to normal. Yeah. I don't need to protect myself. And then,
to a degree, that's back to your point about Walking Dead. Like, if anything can become normal if you just throw yourself in the middle of it.
True enough. Yep. I guess that guy's ready for apocalypse more than we are.
Well, no, I mean, I can't deny it. Well, no, I guess there's actually 2 ways to look at that, because he's not ready because he thinks. I don't think what he's saying is the apocalypse is normal. He's in denial. You know what I mean? If he were saying this is the new normal and I've come to peace with it, I think that would be slightly different. You know what I mean? But I do think, and this isn't the most like happy-go-lucky subject matter, but at the same time, it's kind of like it's forcing every human, because like what's crazy about this disease, like if you're just And it's not like anybody isn't thinking this, whether they talk about it or not. But it's a psychological bully as much as it is a physical one, because it puts people in the position of the victims of the disease dying alone in most cases, or in many cases, and in the case of their family, not being able to even see again that person that gets it and goes. And that's crazy, first of all, just on its own. But what's interesting about it, from a like just analytical point of view, is that it does force almost everybody on some level to confront that reality that both they might die alone in 3 weeks from today. Like basically nobody on earth can be sure that 3 weeks from today they won't be dying alone. And on the same side of that coin, nobody can be sure that their friends or family won't die alone, like, in that context. So both awful elements of that have just become, in terms of accepting a new normal, have just become like, that's it. Like, that's the deal. Like, and it's random as fuck. Bjorn and I, know someone whose girlfriend got it and got really sick and was on a ventilator for 16 days, and now she's coming off of it. And like I think I said last week, I worked with a lady who was in the hospital and is coming off of it too. But other people in their same shoes are dying, and then other people are just fine, like don't even get sick. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's just arbitrary. There's no rhyme or reason. There's some patterns, but at the end of the day, any individual could succumb to it, and any individual's contacts could succumb to it in that way. And I just find that really interesting because, like, the DC sniper or terrorism or certain other things have made you confront, or mass shootings, have made you confront the idea that, yeah, man, I might go to the mall and there might be a twisted, tormented human in there with guns who just opens fire. And we've been dealing with that, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't quite feel the same. I feel like
it falls more in the category of a natural disaster, right? So like, if you live in, for me at least, growing up in Louisiana, floods and hurricanes are a real threat and people die from them, and there ain't shit you can do about it. And it's nobody's fault. And it definitely hits poor people harder than rich people, and et cetera, et cetera. But it's just nature. And if you're in the way, you're in the way. And I think to a degree, there's a way that humans adjust to the idea of a natural disaster that's a new threat. That's I live near a volcano kind of mentality that this falls closer into, for me at least, where it, like Bjorn, you mentioned it early on, that this just feels so selective in the way that it's like there are casualties in the wake of it, but there seems to be a target. And not that we know it and can articulate what that is, but there seems to be this path of like carving out a certain, swath of humanity. And to me, I think that's kind of where my head has gone with this, is like, the natural disaster thing as opposed to other types of threats like war or, like famine. At this point, famine is not a natural disaster. Famine is someone's choice. Someone in charge chose to allow those people to starve. But this is kind of this blended thing. There's this natural disaster plus a bunch of other humans allowing other humans to die. It's this weird, like, blurry line, but it's starting to lean more, the way I'm thinking about it, in the natural disaster sense. Earth and history and evolution just started selecting a bunch of people that are going to die from this, and it's not for the purpose of those people dying. It's just this other thing that's happening, just like hurricanes or tsunamis or whatever. Yeah. Unlike mass shootings, where you look at that and go, not one of those people needed to die. That was totally fucking pointless. The like evolution didn't choose that.
Well, I mean, yeah, you could probably find an argument that it.
Sure, but not in the same way.
So Spanish flu, Guess who was most impacted by it?
The Spanish.
No. Love that.
I just had to. I'm sorry, Spanish.
Popular myth is that it started in a boot camp in Kansas and then went to the trenches in World War I with the U.S. Army. But the people that it affected globally, 20 to 40-year-olds. You see hospitals full of young men lying in cots, dying. And they, because it was wartime, because the world was all in chaos at first, the way that it was covered, the way that it was reported, yeah, they knew there was something going on. There were a lot of deaths. But the statistics weren't in the way that they are now, in any sense. And it's kind of taken even until this last century for people that study epidemics, epidemiologists, whatnot, to say we're actually looking at 50 to 100 plus million people that died from the Spanish flu. And the target range was this 20 to 40-year-old band. And that's so fucking interesting to me as just like out of the box thought. The world was at war. Who was fighting? 20 to 40-year-old men. The world doesn't like war. There's a fucking virus. Stop you fuckers from doing this.
Right.
I don't know. Like.
Well, yeah, no. I mean,
the world over right now, old people by A, staying alive.
Yeah.
And B, voting the wrong way.
I just want to clarify for Flawedcast Nation that was Bjorn Rude.
I love old people actually a lot.
You know what old people I love, yeah.
I really, really do. No, I meant that as like a comic like response to like the idea of resource finiteness.
Well, no, but we've actually, or at least I think put that one out there too, on a not even joking level, not of like a serious level either, but just a speculative, funny, food for thought kind of level. But Mishak, you were saying looking at it as a natural disaster, and I agree, but I guess to me, I just think it's something that whether it's in this moment or at a later one, people are coming to realize that it's a little of everything, you know. It's a little natural disaster. It's a little just illogical terrorism. It's a volcano, like, you know, it's a shooting. It's
a preventable disaster, you know.
Like, yeah, I mean, there's preventable,
but not necessarily avoidable. Like, in the sense that this particular disease and this particular virus, if it happens the way that we think it seems to have happened, which is humans fucking up, then that didn't have to happen that way.
Right.
But eventually, a virus kind of seems inevitable.
Well, I think there's a degree of the control of it, like the idea that you can't reason with a virus, you know, I think is something that works into people's thinking. But it is, I think, on many levels interesting to just think about the, you know, it's actually a running theme on our podcast in many ways, but like just the collective psychology or sociology of you know, these kinds of things in general, because what is the, you know, real view of this thing, like when people are like I guess you take a group of people and you say you need to stay home and social distance or whatever, right? Let's just take Washington, because it's, to me, it's a pretty good example where there's not a rule, really. There's rules about businesses for sure that they have to suspend business, but there's not a lot of like rules about what an individual can do, but there's some strong suggestions and general things that seem to be accepted. People do it. They're listening to what they hear. They're hearing that this virus can last X amount of time on surfaces. You can catch it this way. You can catch it that way. Every person you interact with is, you know, exponential in a lot of ways. All this stuff, right? So some people just don't care. Some people can't afford to care. Like, they just have to deal with it. A lot of people take it to heart and do like extreme adherence to these rules, but everybody basically absorbs this information. And for some of the people who believe the science, they're starting to go, because this is, I think, the problem with like these protests and everything else. There's people go, yeah, I spent the last 3 weeks at home. Like, I haven't done anything. You know, like, yeah, I've touched packages and this or that, but I literally, like, have not been exposed to other people. I should at least be able to go play basketball with my buddy who's also stayed home the last 3 weeks. So even people who are taking it seriously are starting.
I just don't see those protesters actually making that form of logical argument.
No. I'm not saying the protesters are. I'm saying because for example, I went and took the dog for a walk on Saturday, and there was a baseball game going on at the park right over here, like a group of friends, but like a big group, like 30 or 40 people, not like just a couple of people playing around, like people in the bleachers watching at a just park baseball field, people over aside from it with like their picnic set up, like people were kicking it in the park right by my place this weekend. And on the one hand, there was a voice in my head that was like, you guys are fucking stupid. But on another, I had to think, you know, for a lot of people right now, they say, yeah, I spent that last 2 or 3 weeks following all the rules. I'm not sick. I'm not breaking further rules. But now I'm going to start interacting with people who are also following the rules or tell me they are. You know what I mean? And I'm not justifying it or saying it's cool. I'm just saying, like, you can understand why not the protesters, but just people who are just saying, fuck it, I'm just going to, you know, cut this corner or do this thing.
Well, and they also probably have the feeling, just like Meshach did, of making contact with the lovely lady at Alger Bay.
Right.
That was an uplifting moment of humanness for them. And if you're stuck in the woods in a trailer and you finally touch somebody, like, yeah, that's going to be an uplifting moment, right?
Yeah, and I mean, on the one hand, I totally agree. On the other, that's like actually touching. Some of these people might be saying, well, I'm just playing baseball. Like, I won't touch them. I will touch the ball, you know, or whatever.
You're hitting on a point that I was having a conversation with a couple friends this week, and they were starting to express that, like, these are people who are super responsible. They're super conscientious. They've done all the things. They're very aware. They're following the rules, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they're getting stir crazy, and they want to hug their friends, and they want to have social interactions again, and they don't have a bunch of other people at home. They don't have a pet to hug. That, like, they're just like, how the fuck long do I have to do this before some of these rules just need to be bent a little bit?
Even if it's just for a few people, right? Even if just a few friends and family.
That's going to be the interesting twist here, is like, to a degree, it's evil or it's easy, and we you know, I enjoy making fun of a bunch of fucking protesters in masks saying I don't have to wear a mask. But at the same time, I get it. I totally understand, and I think that's going to become a much less fringe perspective very soon. To your point, Rob, that some people are going to be looking around going, like, if you guys can't come up with a test to prove that I am susceptible, I got sick a couple months ago, I feel fine now, I followed all your fucking rules, et cetera, et cetera. All my neighbors have too. We're going to have a goddamn barbecue. Fuck you. And all it takes is one of those to create another outbreak. And now it's not reasonable people who get to make that decision. You know, it's not.
Well, I know. That's why it's such a conundrum on all levels, because first of all, just in terms of social responsibility, that's a weight on, do you do like my parents or my wife's parents who haven't seen their grandson in a month and a half or whatever, and are thinking to themselves, well, hey, we haven't seen anybody for this long. You guys haven't seen anybody for this long. Can we at least, like, maybe see that grandkid soon? You know what I mean? Because, like, since we're not doing all this, can there be some reward for that? Like, can we start going to this, not can we resume life as normal, but just can we make, like you said, Meshach, like, just bend 1 or 2 rules here, like informed decision, right? You know what I mean? And it's hard to blame that, but on the other hand, the point of all of it is that, just because it's looking better today, or things seem hunky-dory, as Bjorn, I love that term, hunky-dory, as you said earlier, doesn't necessarily mean that's in any way the case, and any one of us might have just gotten exposed yesterday, and any one exposure is a multiplicity of that, you know what I mean? Because if Meshach's seen 52 people in the last month, and each of those people has seen 2, that's 104, people that Meshach represents. But the truth is, they've all seen more than 2, probably more like 52 or 100, So that one encounter with Meshach is like seeing 1,000 people for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like, I was thinking about it the other day. My folks they have a neighboring cabin to mine, and they were out there having a fire, and I went over and I wore my mask, and I stood like 10 feet away from them across the fire and chatted with them for about half an hour. And at one point, my stepdad's like, you could take your mask off or whatever. And I'm like, no, it's not, I'm comfortable having this conversation like this. And I'm not comfortable having the conversation without my mask on, even though you guys are a fair distance away and there's a fire between us and shit. You know what I mean?
The fire, yeah.
But like, nonetheless, I don't think I can, in good faith to myself, give my mom a hug.
Yeah.
At a point here in the near future, because it would require me having been tested, not having it, be given that negative feedback, like that I got a negative lab result, all within a time frame where I had absolutely no interaction with anything that then had any interaction with anybody else. And I have a girlfriend and a cat. They both go outside and they bring all sorts of stuff back in with them. I'm about to get, corona from any source. Most like the cat gets pet all the time. Cat's probably covered in fucking corona.
Well, I'm thinking people are doing less cat petting right now. Sadly for him, he'd probably be very delighted to get one stranger just like Meshach, just touch him.
People don't think cats got corona, but they don't realize everybody else thinks that too, and they're all petting my cat.
Well, this does sound like a big vector. This could be a super spreader.
We need a chart to see how many people could be petting Bjorn's cat.
Yeah, we can trace 175 cases directly back to this cat.
Oh, that'd be great.
Petting it, thinking it was sweet.
I should close the cat, not the shop. Shit.
Well, I understand your hesitation to take the mask off with your parents. I think it's interesting to think of the person at Cash and Carry telling you things are going back to normal. You're wearing gloves and a mask, and they're wearing nothing, and they're telling you things are fine. Yeah. And there's a point where it feels kind of like, wait a minute, am I tripping? You know what I mean? But what's weird, and I think what goes back to the psychological fucked upness to the whole thing, and what's kind of contradictory in some ways, my sister and I were talking about it like several weeks ago, and she was like, well, like for her kids, for example, let's say one of them had it, didn't know they were sick, and then gave it to one of their grandparents, and then one of their grandparents died. Not only does she obviously not want that to happen to one of her kids' grandparents, whether it's her own parents or her parents-in-law, she doesn't want her kids to live with knowing that they had an encounter with the grandparent that ended up killing them, right? So on the one level, psychologically, that's one of the other layers of fucked upness to this whole thing. But what's crazy is it's kind of ignorant in a way, because yes, maybe older people are more susceptible to it, but your grandparent could give it to your kid and your kid could die too. Like that's not happening from what I understand nearly as much, but people our age are getting killed by it. People who are athletes and shit are dying from this. In fact, there was like a ESPN reporter, young guy who died several months ago of pneumonia, I think. Do you remember this, Meshach?
Yeah.
Do you know who I'm talking about? Because it was in like December or November. And now I'm wondering, you know what I'm saying? Because it was a sudden, like, he got sick. We took him to the hospital. He was fine several weeks later. Like,
I got to the hospital?
No, not us. I'm saying the story was.
Okay.
No, like his girlfriend posted like a thing
Jesus.
saying like this is.
We
But it was a sports reporter who was in his mid 30s who like
Nuts.
who died of like pneumonia or a flu in before
Like,
this was a thing,
yeah.
basically. But now that I'm saying it, I'm remembering how similar to COVID it sounded.
Well,
And I guess all I'm trying to say is it's not as if just the grandparents get it. You know what I mean?
Well,
That's like almost like old thinking, you know?
and honestly, like I've heard so many of those that it kind of goes against the theory that this is a Wuhan sourced virus. Like this might have ended up taking off there, but it might have come from somewhere else, and people could have been dealing with it all over already.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know. And who knows where any of that
Because
came.
it has such a long potential incubation stage. It chooses to infect and show symptoms in a certain percentage of people in a certain amount of time, all in which they're contagious. Like you
Okay.
add those all up, and now you're looking at this time frame that's like 6 weeks to 2 months, 2.5 months long before you even fucking get your hands on what's going on.
Okay, hold up. Let me check. I'm sorry, but when I mentioned this dude, I've never heard anyone bring that up before, and I'm sure someone has. But listen to this article. I'm sorry, I don't mean to put off the things, but December 27th, 2019. Headline: ESPN reporter's fiance reveals new details about his sudden death. This undated photo shows ESPN college football reporter Edward Ashcroft. The Sports Network announced Ashcroft died Tuesday, December 27, 2019, after a brief illness. Ashcroft, blah, 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 joined, and here's his history. Anyway, so then they embed the tweets from his fiance, right? And she says, it starts with 4 of 12. I also want to take the opportunity to provide more clarity about his passing. As a journalist, it was of the utmost importance to him that stories be accurate. 5 of 12. Edward was admitted to the hospital a week after our first visit to the ER, where he was diagnosed with multifocal pneumonia. After failed antibiotic treatment with worsening symptoms, we took him back to the ER. He was immediately admitted. Edward was admitted to the hospital a week after our first visit. He was diagnosed with multifocal pneumonia after failed antibiotic treatment, worsening symptoms. We took him back to the ER. And he was immediate. Sorry, that was a repeat. After many tests, bone marrow, and lung biopsies, treatment was started for presumed diagnosis of HLH, an unregulated overactivation of the immune system, which caused it to attack itself. Within 3 days of being moved into the ICU, he passed. So basically,
that's COVID for sure.
Does that not sound like it?
Absolutely.
Like from the few details, and this is an article I'm just reading from December 27th. This isn't like someone referencing it and saying, "Oh, see, look, like this is just real time." You know what I'm saying? Like just looking at that, talking about it and looking it up, and that article and that tweet thread.
And where was he located?
He was 34 years old. I don't know if I'll have to look for that. Where he was located. Oh, New Orleans. Of course. I mean, it was before all that.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. No, he was planning to marry his fiancee, Katie Bertrou, in New Orleans in April. So, but anyway.
Sad, man.
But, he was 34, it sounds like. Yeah, Edward Ashcroft, ESPN college football reporter, dies at 34. But he was 34, and it may not have been COVID, it might have been, but COVID's doing that to 34-year-olds, and it's just crazy because most of the world, at least America, is running around acting like it only has any threat to old people. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of what the conventional wisdom is.
That's true. And it's false. You're right. We all need to fucking wash our asses, and we all need to wash our hands.
And get bidets.
And wear your goddamn masks. Yeah. Yep. And it doesn't matter. Like, yes, go get a good mask if you can. But I saw there was a cool study done in Germany with this particular lens and a backdrop that was able to measure really high definition dynamics of air movement. And they were looking at like rate of speed of movement from coughing to breathing of air particles and like size of particles, aerosols, distance of propulsion from coughing in your elbow, coughing in your hand to wearing a mask, not wearing a mask, and straight up like anything, like a t-shirt, you're cutting down the distance of movement of water vapors and aerosols out of your mouth by like 20 times. Like it's going right here versus going right there everywhere. Just by talking, breathing, coughing, all that shit. So any mask you got is worth wearing right now.
I saw another graphic that showed like just, you know, little like line art kind of drawings of smiley faces, right, with two people, and it's like this person has COVID, this person does not, neither of them have a mask, here's the percentage of transmission. This person has COVID and is wearing a mask, this person does not and is not wearing a mask, here is the percentage of transmission. Flip it until you see both people wearing a mask, here is the percentage of transmission. And it goes down to like 0.0 something 5 if you're both wearing a mask.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've seen tons of these videos. My mom has gone from this like at first being in the South and being in Texas and whatever, like we're in warm weather, like, you know, this is not that real and blah, 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 not a big deal, to okay, all of a sudden we're in quarantine, to my mom can't just sit still in quarantine, so she just immediately went to sewing masks to give them away. And her and a bunch of women in church are like just sewing masks. Like she's sewed like hundreds of masks and created all these like innovations around ways to insert filters and like you know, make them all washable and etc. The best version I've seen though that I sent to her was a regular gym sock, like a tube sock, cut both sides, so you just have a tube, slide paper towel in the middle, cut downwards halfway, 2 little slices, and use those slices as ear hooks. You got a mask.
Oh yeah,
literally all just cuts and slide in a piece of paper towel. The paper towel is the filter, everything else is the mask. It's great.
Love it. Yeah, that's great.
That's sewing needed.
Yeah.
But my mom's been doing all kinds of like variations of different types of elastic and filters and
well, I want to get my hands on whatever the most high-tech version your mom is gonna make right now.
Like, yeah, I told her I asked her what material, and she said she had a like she had a cedar box full of old cotton T-shirts and stuff for quilts that now she's just translating into masks with filters.
All right.
So I was like, that's comfy. Right. I want one of those.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Hook me up. Let's do it. All right, y'all. Buonanotte. Yeah. Wishing y'all the best health and happiness to all of Flawedcast peoples.
And other nations as well.
Enjoy the Ark and the flood.
Yeah.
And
cats.
Yeah.
Frogs. Bats. Everybody band up, man. This time of love, time to celebrate the fact that we are alive, the fact that the mortality that we are knowing and learning a little bit more about in these times is what shapes us and what makes every moment actually worth celebrating in and of itself. And like the temporal nature of our universe is not to be taken for granted.
Well, maybe we're all just hallucinations anyway. So
indeed.
It's cyber sex, not cyber war.
I like that a lot.
Oh yeah.
Okay, well, blessings.
All right, Charles. Blessings be to y'all. Take care now. Loves.